Hi all, I have an amazing blitz encounter to show you today. David Howell, one of the strongest UK Grandmasters who did really well in the recent Isle of Man tournament. This is him against Garry Kasparov. Yes, the legend Garry Kasparov. So in this friendly blitz game, d4 from David, knight f6, and David employs the Jobava London system in this game. So this is a flavour of the London system with not c3 later, but knight c3 using that parking space, that c3 square. So quite interesting. White forgoes the possibilities of playing either c3 or c4 with piece pressure on the centre instead. So d5, bishop f4, so that is the classic place for the London system bishop. c6, e3, we have bishop f5. So this seems to be a free move from black without any penalties that you might expect. Sometimes when the pawn's on c4, queen b3 could be a nuisance, but it's not the case here. So has black just equalised with easy development? f3, there is a slight downside perhaps, that there's a tempo gainer in both g4 and potentially e4 if black allows it. We have e6, and in fact this tempo gaining move is used. But is there some controversy here? Does it create weaknesses? We have h4 threatening to trap that bishop. Black reacts now with h5. So stopping h5 from white. g5, knight g8, bishop d3. Now knight d7 was played, offering double pawns. A very interesting decision indeed. It seems as though shouldn't black play knight e4, knight e7 here to support g6. In this case, white does well actually with the move e4. This is actually technically possible, believe it or not, in this position. And white's doing very well here. Black's pretty cramped, and the development seems awkward. So a critical line, d takes. It looks as though d4 is hanging, and after f takes, after queen takes d4, can you see what white could play here? Which is really quite crushing. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. Okay, white could unleash here knight b5, so hitting the queen and wanting to go into c7, so that bishop is supporting this common square. And if c takes, bishop takes b5 check, is winning the queen. The queen has to go back, then that's just winning the queen with a big advantage. And of course, if the knight's pinned with knight c6, well, I can still just take the queen. So yes, that would be pretty nasty after e4. If black's best here is knight c8, then this is a very good looking position for white with a big advantage. Black has very passive pieces in general. Okay, so knight d7, yeah, it does seem to be a bit double-edged to allow the double pawns. Bishop takes, f takes. Knight g e2, so the knight actually could use f4 later to hit the g6 square, and also e6, so both of these guys are a little bit vulnerable here. Bishop b4, queen d3, knight e7, so protecting g6 from the queen. We have bishop h2. Now in this position, yeah, it's interesting, vacating f4 for knight f4, which would hit both e6 and g6. Kasparov plays c5 in this position. On knight f5, this looks as though it's an interesting move. Say casting queenside, taking here, for example, knight f4. This should be quite okay for white. There's significant pressure here. There's interesting piece play, and there's potential for e4 later. So that's a small advantage for white technically. So c5, a3, we have c4 being played, queen d2, bishop a5, e4. Now here, Kasparov may have made a slight mistake. It's only a blitz game though, just bear that in mind. Kasparov played b5. Perhaps better is queen b6. This has an idea of shoring up the d5 pawn sometimes. For example, like this, with queen c6 now. So black could strengthen both d5 and e6 here with the queen on c6, and still look forward to b5. So b5 immediately though, d5 and e6 are a little bit vulnerable. Queen e3, black castles, white castles kingside. bishop b6, and it looks as though this is quite a nasty pin against d4, both against the queen and the king. So this f3 clearly invited some dark square weaknesses. Are they being celebrated by black here? White plays an important prophylaxis style move, king g2, getting the king off that diagonal. If knight f4, this really runs into e5 for black. After knight e6, e takes, knight takes, black could end up with a fantastic position like this. That is a really nasty diagonal indeed. And knight f6, a very nice tactical move, putting more pressure on d4. For example, this could be a total disaster for white. If we look at this line again, after knight f6, even with c3 instead, black goes into that g4 square, and that's pretty delicious. Black's doing very, very well there. So king g2, very, very important safety move in light of things like that, variations like that. King h7. If e5 was played here, in fact, there's knight takes b5. This is possible, for example, like this, where it isn't too dangerous. White's actually doing quite well there. So king h7. And now we have rook ad1, a6. Here, if e5 in this position, white can actually take on d5 without too much penalty. Ed, knight d4, white's fine there. So rook ad1, a6. And we have knight f4, so striking both at e6 and g6, but doesn't invite e5, with this still looks like a dangerous pin. e5 is played, knight e6. Now e takes, but there's a shocker here. In fact, there's one or two shocking resources for white in this position. Can you guess any of them? 50 points for either what was played or an alternative. If you want to pause the video now, what would you play with white in this position? Okay, rook takes d4 was played. This is a very, very interesting position with very interesting resources. Also, queen d2 was possible, believe it or not, because if d takes, queen takes c3 actually threatens queen takes g7 mate, so it's a double attack position. So this is nice. And if d4, rook takes d4, still with ideas of double attacking. So for example, queen e8, rook takes d7, threatens mate, and this will be very, very nice for white. So a very, very interesting resource. Queen d2 is possible here. And if queen c8, then knight takes d5. This position is material up for white. So in the game though, rook takes d4 was played with similar ideas to if bishop takes, queen takes, threatening mate. We have queen e8, queen d2 now, rook f7, knight takes d5. So white has made this into an exchange sacrifice right now. Knight takes, e takes, bishop takes d4, but there's a nicely entrenched kind of octopus knight on e6 here. Knight f8 is played. This might not be the best move technically. Rook c8 looks to be avoiding the fork, knight c7. So for example, bishop d6, this position, but still white is in a dominating situation here with a small advantage at the very least. So black actually gives back the exchange. Knight c7, rook takes c7, bishop takes, but white's still doing quite well here, very well in fact. Queen f7, bishop e5, knight d7, rook e1, rook e8, bishop drops back. So this endgame is interesting. After queen f5, queen e4 protecting c2, knight b6, and white does undouble black's pawns for this endgame. d6, g6, king g3, king g7, king f4, knight d7, stopping king e5, king e3, the king wants to wander into black's position, king f7, king d4, king e6, bishop g3, protecting the pawn. And yes, black is in trouble here. It looks as though white could chip away with things like b3 at the very least. And also, isn't black conceding via zugzwang, eventually running out of moves? If the knight moves, then there's king c5. If the king moves, there's going to be king d5. So black's in a kind of zugzwang in any case here, and does concede potentially the c5 square, playing knight b8. In fact, that's used immediately. King c5, king d7, king d5. So making headway, the king can now get into f6 potentially via e5. Knight c6, bishop e1, knight d8, bishop g3, knight c6, c3, knight a5. Now the king goes to f6 via king e5. So going into f6, it's all over. After king takes g6, dismantling black's pawn chain. And after king f7, Kasparov had to resign. So very, very interesting use of that surprise weapon, the knight c3 system, which is known quite often as the Jobava London System. So Jobava, very, very high level player, using this with great success throughout his career. You can check out a free interactive course at Chessable at Kingscrusher TV/Jobava. If you check that out, yeah, lots of trainable variations and a free video by Grandmaster Simon Williams. So he has a spicy style to explaining chess, and I like his attacking style. It's it's something to aspire to for any attacking player. So very nice free course there to check out with Simon Williams explaining a lot of the nuances of the Jobava system. Okay, hope you enjoyed that, and check out that interactive course. Thanks very much.